It is now 7 p.m. Time to call the Monday, July 18th, 2022 Advisory Plan Commission meeting to order. Will staff please note the presence of a quorum?
Kristen Berkman. Matthew Deck.
Here.
Robert Horke.
Here.
Mike Johns.
Here.
Jenny Keller.
Here.
Andre Maui.
Here.
Victor McCarty.
Here.
Dave Schmitz.
Here.
Cindy Spoljarek.
Here.
And FYI, Kristen's not just late, she will not be in attendance tonight. Item next, as always, is approval of the minutes of our previous meeting, that one being on July 5th, 2022. Is there a motion to accept these minutes into the record or approve them, however you want to look at it?
Motion to approve the July 5th, 2022 APC minutes as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Dr. Kelleher, second from Deck. Will staff please call the roll?
Matthew Deck.
Yes.
Robert Horke.
Yes.
Mike Johns.
Yes.
Jenny Keller.
Yes.
Andre Maui.
Yes.
Victor McCarty.
Yes.
Dave Schmitz.
I'll abstain since I was absent.
Cindy Spoljarek.
Yes.
Meetings are accepted. Thank you. Item next is staff to please review the rules and procedures for tonight's meeting. There are no public hearings, but we have all the other fun to do.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. For our rules of conduct this evening, please do not disrupt the proceedings in any way. If you need to have a private discussion, we ask that you please quietly exit the room. Please silence your devices at this time. And again, if you must answer them, please quietly exit the room. Don't have to do that because we're not having public hearings. And so we would just like to remind everybody to speak directly into the microphone so your comments can be put onto the record. Also, please mute your microphone when not speaking. If you do come up to the podium to speak, please make sure that the microphone is on as indicated by the green light on the base of the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you. Item next is approval of the consent agenda, which tonight includes one item. Is there a motion for approval of our consent agenda?
Before quick motion, I just wanted to mention, because I had never heard of Slim Chickens before, so looking up on their website, this is going to be their first Indiana location. So if they're listening, I'd like to thank them for choosing Westfield to move into the Midwest market, so really appreciate that. With that, make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. I have a motion from Victor McCarty, second by Andre Maui. Will staff please call the roll?
Kristen Berkman.
Absent.
No, sorry. Matthew Deck.
Yes.
Robert Horke.
Yes.
Mike Johns.
Yes.
Jenny Keller.
Yes.
Andre Maui.
Yes.
Victor McCarty.
Yes.
Dave Schmitz.
Yes.
Cindy Spoljarek.
Consent agenda is
Yes.
approved. Thank you. We have one item of business tonight. Item is 2207-ODP-07 and 2207-SPP-07, Osborne Trails Phase 3. Is there staff presentation, please?
Good evening, Commission members. For the record, Ryan Collingwood with the Community Development Department. This item in front of you this evening is an overall development plan and primary plat review of 107 single-family lots on about 43.5 acres located west of Horton Road and north of 193rd Street. This item is before you this evening for approval consideration. The project had its public hearing at the July 5th APC meeting. Since that meeting, revisions have been made and submitted plans are compliant. There have been 2 submitted public comments associated with the proposal, and both of those comments are provided in a public comment exhibit. Tony Bagato of Lennar Homes is here tonight, and I believe he does not plan to make a presentation on additional details of the project. He is available to answer any questions, though, and as am I, should you have any for staff. Thank you.
Thank you. In the absence of a petitioner's presentation, we'll move on to any comments that Plan Commission may have. the public comments are really something that we need for the petitioner and the residents to resolve. That is not actually something that's associated with the business that we have to transact here with this tonight. That being said, do we have any questions or comments from Plan Commission members for staff or the petitioner?
I have a couple of comments. First of all, if you bring up, not the concept plan, but one of the last things, it shows the layout of the open space, the common area. Right. I know in pre-APC, we talked about this. The area in the very center is a pond, and our UDO requires that it be landscaped in a natural fashion with trees or shrubs or bushes or something. And I understand that the petitioner said there wasn't enough room around the pond to do that. So my question is there a way to make that work by putting some trees and landscaping on lots around the pond instead of in the common space? Is there a way to move the homes on the western side of the pond over to give you more room? Because it looks like you have a lot of common area in B so that you can achieve that natural look that we're looking for. We have ponds in almost every subdivision that we get, and we're trying to make them look less sterile and a little more natural. So I'd like to hear if you have any thoughts on that.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Tony Bagato with Lennar Homes, 11555 North Meridian Street, Suite 400 in Carmel. Yes, we are aware of that. We're looking into some possibilities through final engineering. We can take an opportunity to try to, if we can, shrink the pond or increase or shrink the easements. We'd look to do that. Along the west side of the property line, there is a regulated drain, so I don't think we can shift the home sites that we would like to. We do have room to fit some trees in the corners around the pond today, but we are going to work with staff on final engineering. Our understanding is that today, based on the code, we do comply, but we'll work on getting trees in there as much as we can.
Okay, it would make it a lot more attractive and natural for the
Correct,
residents.
yeah, we would prefer that as well.
Plus, as you probably know, those big open areas are just perfect places for Canada geese. They can see their
Yeah.
predators coming, they eat grass, they have a pond, and they're a nuisance, so.
Yeah.
Thank you. The other thing is just a comment to the general public. I know we've had a lot of comments on adding more amenities, making the amenities larger, and I just want everybody to know that our UDO, our zoning ordinance, does not require amenities in single-family subdivisions. Most of these are done voluntarily, and at some point they become property of the HOA, so it would be up to the HOA then to limit other members or whatever. It's not up to, we don't have the ability to do that. So I know there's been concern about that. I wanted to let you know that we may share your concerns, but we have no authority to do that, and that becomes an HOA issue. That's it.
Thank you. Other commissioner comments, questions for staff or petitioner? In the absence of any further comments, this item is in front of us for a approval of the primary plat and overall development plan. There's one condition suggested by staff. Is there a motion regarding this petition?
I'll make a motion to approve the primary plat and overall development plan, 2207 SPP 07 and 2207 ODP 07 with the following conditions. That all necessary approvals be obtained from the Westfield Public Works Department and Hamilton County surveyors prior to the issuance of an improvement location permit.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. I have a motion from Matt Deck and a second from Dave Schmitz. Will staff please call the roll?
Matt Deck,
Yes.
Robert Horke,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Jeannie Keller,
Yes.
Andre Maui,
Yes.
Victor McCarty,
Yes.
Dave Schmitz,
Yes.
Cindy Spilgeric.
Yes.
Thank you. That item is now approved. Thank you. We have no No public hearing items as indicated previously. We now do have two miscellaneous items, which are items that have been on our agenda and are in front of us tonight for further discussion. First one of which is 2203-PUD-05, Towns at Union PUD. Staff report.
Good evening. Thank you, President, members of the Plan Commission. For the record, Caleb Ernest with the Community Development Department. This request is for the change of zoning of 12.85 acres from the AGSF1 district to the Towns at Union PUD district. Property is located generally east and adjacent to Union Street and south of David Brown Drive. Adjacent property to the east is also zoned AGSF1. To the south, it is zoned Springwater PUD. Adjacent properties to the west, north, and east are zoned the MF2 multifamily medium density district. The proposal includes a townhouse residential land use. This item did receive its public hearing back on March 7th Plan Commission meeting, and since that meeting, the petitioner has submitted revisions as well as responded to the issue list. A summary of the revisions can be found in the staff report for this item, but include revising the definition section, concept plan, maximum dwelling units, the general regulations, development standards, infrastructure standards, design standards, and character exhibits. John Davashewitz of Nelson and Frankenberger, representing the project, is here tonight. He plans on making a presentation and is available for questions, as am I, should you have any for city staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Davashewitz.
So my understanding is it's a little more informal process than the typical, so I've got, no shirt and tie today, so just trying to make everybody feel at ease and comfortable, and we'll walk through this and show you what our changes are with regard to the plan, and then solicit additional feedback. It's housekeeping-wise, we'll likely be back in front of the Plan Commission depending on the comments that we receive this evening at your August 15th meeting. The first would put a little too quick, I think, response time for us and staff to get back everything to you. So it's likely that we would be back on the 15th of, there we go, the 15th of August. Won't be redundant to staff. Everyone's familiar with where the location of the property is. They're on the east side of Union Street, just south of David Brown. I wanted to talk briefly, this is a slide we've shown the Planning Commission previously. I'm talking about connectivity and walkability and bikeability. The green circle that you see is a radius from the center of our site along Union Street. It's approximately a 10 to 12 minute walk down to the new park space. It's approximately a 10-minute walk to the Midland, a little less than 10 minutes, maybe 8 or 9 minutes over to the Monon, and then about a 4-minute biking radius to all those locations as well. Adjacent properties to our site include the Ashley Place Apartments, here highlighted in red. To the south and east of our property is the existing cemetery, land that they'll continue to own and maintain. Valley Farms Apartments and Hamilton Square are both on the west side of Union Street, south of David Brown. Some photos that we'd shown you previously of those locations. In terms of density, one of the items to note is that there's been a reduction in the number of units proposed for this site down to 73 from the previous 84, which puts us at approximately 5.5 to 6 dwellings per acre. That's significantly less than the surrounding multifamily uses. And another item to note, there's no adjacent surrounding single-family detached neighborhoods or dwellings to the subject site. The prior concept plan included 84 homes, all 6-unit buildings, all 3 stories in height, with 1 amenity proposed at the location shown here. The revised concept plan we're asking for your input on this evening is identified here. It includes 73 units. All the dwellings would be 2 stories in height rather than 3. I'll show you the revised architecture in a moment. Those would include dwellings along Union Street. Now that there's three different types, there's 4-unit buildings, 5-unit buildings, and 6-unit buildings, where previously there was just 6-unit buildings. That opens up some space for active amenities and open space area. There's an open space amenity area here that'll include a bike station as an amenity. There's a boulevard entrance where before there was just a standard entrance into the neighborhood. In addition to that, there's a proposed dog park and then a fire pit seating area that we've got an example of that's planned for that space. Additional enhancements that were made is that the tree preservation areas were widened along the east perimeter of the site. You'll see a side-by-side in a moment. You'll see how that was achieved. Additionally, there are varied unit counts throughout the site, as I indicated, 4, 5, and 6-unit buildings along Union Street, and then there's 5 and 6-unit buildings interior to the site. These are 5s, 6s, and 5s to our south, so that's going to address some of that monotony concern that was mentioned at the prior meeting. This is that side-by-side comparison. You can see generally where dwellings were eliminated and open space enhancements were provided. Amenity enhancements were provided here and here, whereby now there are 3 proposed amenities where previously there was 1. By comparison, the UDO would require 3 amenity locations. And I think a question was asked at one of the prior meetings in relation to one of the developments to the south. They had provided 3 amenities. I think that was a dog park, a fire pit, and a playground. Where at this location, we've provided 3 amenities now rather than 1. Some examples of those amenities: dog park, fire pit area, or covered seating area, and then a bike station that would be included as part of the amenity, more closely positioned along Union Street where we have connectivity. Regarding the architectural dwellings, these are the revised exhibits included in the PUD. These, of course, are the dwellings that would be positioned along Union Street with the front door and the garage facing east, away from Union Street. And these would be examples of the front of the dwellings. Again, all 2-story dwellings throughout the site, no 3-story dwellings. The architecture would be made compatible in terms of the type and style of architectural elements that are run across both those units so that they would look like they belong together rather than a disconnected set, again, where there's elements here that you would see along covered porches along the front of those, individual articulation of individual units, and then these are the ones interior to the site. There are also some rear load dwellings interior to the site. Right as you enter, you'll have a vista going east, and those homes, the front of homes, will be seen as you turn into the site. And then it won't be until you get, if you're traveling via vehicle, as you get closer into the site that you would have visibility of dwellings which are characteristic of the illustration seen here. Some additional dwellings, as you'll see in the ordinance, high impact, what we identify here as high impact site elevations, those more visible like at the entrance along the end cap of a unit along Union Street, those would be treated with a greater amount of masonry on the site elevation with regard to additional gable-in treatments as well. Just some interior photos that we've shown you previously. The anticipated average sale price we feel like is going to fall somewhere between $400,000 and $450,000 as an average. This illustration was provided. This shows a 2-story dwelling in comparison. So if you follow me, this is the center line of Union Street, and today as you drive north on Union Street, you look to your left and you see the single row of parking and the 2-story masonry buildings, which are the existing apartments. whereby in this situation, you'd look to your right and you would see the tree lawn, the path, the landscape area in front of the dwelling, and no parking in front of the dwelling along the east side of the perimeter, all throughout the site. There's no proposed parking that would be between any of the dwellings and Union Street, whereby observation that exists along that stretch along the west side. One of the things that we were looking at doing here was relegating those parking fields to areas that weren't visible from the street. We think that's an aesthetic that is preferred over having those front load or front garage facing units toward the street with a frontage road that would be between us and Union Street itself. Another illustration that we put together, and again, this was prepared just prior to the decision to go. I think that's, I believe that may still show a 3-story dwelling where the proposed is 2-story, but this helps show how the site topography works. Apologize, let me see if I can bump that up one. The site falls pretty significantly from west to east by about 25 feet. It also falls from north to south. So the positioning of the buildings, the way they're shown here, helps allow us to cover that change in topography. So the individual units from west to east, after you get off that frontage, these units here and here can be stair-stepped by individual unit. And then we also have room to account for the 15-foot topography change between north and south on the site. Generally, the most of the falls through this space here. But again, that separation and the more grid pattern here allows us to address the topographic change that exists on the site. I think those are all the elements of our change. Just to recap, again, lowering of the density from 84 to 73 units. Prior to this, all the dwellings were 3-story in height, and we have all the proposed dwellings now are 2-story in height. Additional amenities provided, additional tree preservation along the east and south perimeter of the site, as well as some modifications that were made to the positioning and undulation, if you will, of the pond. As indicated by the prior petitioner, we're going to, even though there's items that Pulte will work with staff on providing additional landscaping around the perimeter of the pond to make it more natural in appearance. That may not be in the form of shrubs or trees, but other native plantings around the perimeter of the pond will help address that, along with its undulation and size, to help address comments such as Dr. Kelleher made regarding geese mitigation. We've also got, in this situation, some pretty tall trees surrounding the site on all 3 sides of that is going to help mitigate that as well. So with that, I'll conclude. We'd be glad to address comments or questions that the Plan Commission had at this time to add on to where we were before. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have questions or comments?
John, could you go
for-
back to that Union Street corridor cross-section that you had up there a second ago? That, and first of all, thank you, because I had asked for this last time as we were discussing the relative height on the east and the west side and things like that. This is actually moot now that it's gone to 2-story instead of 3, and for me at least, but for everybody else, I just wanted to state, a lot of times I'll look at a section like this and then have to check, is it taken at the best case or the worst case or whatever? In this particular situation, the existing Hamilton Square, this is like the best case on the west side of the road, because it looks like it's only about 1.5 feet higher than Union, which would be the north end. As you go south, and I didn't get out there with a transit and measure it, but just counting the steps going up, it's more like 7 feet higher than Union. So in favor, I guess, of what we're seeing on the east side, the existing apartments grow relative to this as you go south, if I said that correctly.
I'll just jump in real quick. And as we know, this is an infill lot, so I still think this is an appropriate use. And I just want to thank you for really taking to heart all of our comments beforehand, because this is exactly what I at least like to see, meeting in the middle, and you have lesser units now instead of 3-story, 2-story, 3 amenity features, kind of overall better flow of the area and design. So I like it. Thank you for your work on this.
John, I'm in support of this project. I think it's a good infill project. I think Pulte has made great strides in modifying what they initially presented to make this much more attractive. But you know me, the devil's in the details. So if you don't mind, I have some questions, and I can let somebody else jump in if they want to. But looking at the cross-section, you mentioned tree lawn on the east side of Union Street, and you showed 2 trees there, and yet your setback from Union Street is 10 feet. Is that a realistic representation?
Well, there's 2 sets of trees. One set of trees would be in the right-of-way, and that's what I refer to as the tree lawn, the area between the path and the pavement edge. And there would be street trees along the frontage. And these trees, these are trees that would be behind the sidewalk, between the path rather, and the building, and those would be actually on the individual lots that are outside. So while they're not gonna be lined up, as you see here,
Right.
stair
understand.
step, there's 2 rows of trees, one street trees and one.
So where is the
Front yard.
10 feet then? Show me where the 10 feet would be.
The 10-foot setback, and I'll pull the ordinance out if necessary, would be the dimension, the minimum dimension between the front of the dwelling and the right-of-way.
And the right-of-way, okay. Because in your ordinance, you say you aren't going to do street trees. That's what kind of threw me off. On page 7, it says street trees shall not apply. If street trees are provided, they are not required to be located in the right-of-way or within a minimum 8-foot wide planting strip between the curb and the sidewalk.
So
So I guess,
I just spoke to Rex, and Rex corrected me that it's a combination of both, one or the other. And if it's on the front of the lot, it counts as a street tree, so it may meander, and there may not be a double row of trees, but there would be some on each side of the path, provided that there's no utility conflicts.
okay, but this says you don't have to do any. And I guess I'm looking to staff. It's on page 7 and it's E. Street trees shall not apply. If street trees are provided, they are not required to be located within the right-of-way. So it doesn't say you're going to plant them. It says it doesn't apply, but if we want to provide them.
We'll take a look at it, and
Okay.
we'll work with staff to make sure we're accurately describing it.
Okay,
I like what you described with it meandering, so if you get the
Yeah.
language cleaned up to provide that, it would be my preference.
yeah, I don't care if they're 2 like that
Yeah.
or if they're on one side or the other. I just want some.
There-
Or at
there-
least I think we probably should have some. So that's-
We'll make it,
that's the point.
we'll make it clear and definitive.
Okay,
The sum should probably,
yeah.
should relate to the
Something,
number of
something that
units,
can be,
perhaps.
that can be administered by staff.
Okay.
I know you said these are gonna be empty nesters, and yet you still show that picture with a man, a woman, and a kid, so,
We'll prohibit that.
no, I don't care. But that's why I was pushing for a playground in the beginning, because it looked like there might be kids here. I'm fine without doing a playground. I would, however, discourage you from doing a fire pit. Do the covered section, take the fire pit out of your ordinance, because first of all, that's not something that's gonna be used very often. A covered, patio or something will be used. But a fire pit, no. Plus, if you're next to a woods and with the dry weather we've been having, even with the pond, I just don't think that's a good idea. So dog park, bicycle station, and covered gazebo or something, if that would be okay with you.
Along those lines, just to
Sure.
jump in, I like on page 10, that covered there. I think that would look very great in that area with all the woodland that'll be back behind there.
Anybody, just jump in. Bicycle racks, in your description of your answering the concerns that we expressed last time, you said, we can include bike parking and will continue to evaluate the best location. And yet in the ordinance, it says we will not do bike parking.
We'll amend that.
Okay. If anybody wants to jump in, I have more.
One thing that was mentioned that just sparked a thought real quick, just to clear it up, because Jenny mentioned the family, playground, stuff like that. Is this going to be restricted or no? Okay,
It's not,
I didn't think so,
it's not an age-restricted community.
but that's just what it's going to be targeted towards, marketed towards.
Right, their demographic is not going to necessarily include kids, so.
It's, right. It's not that it would be discouraged, it's just that Pulte finds that its buyers tend to fall into a certain demographic band, and what I'll call traditional family, for lack of a better explanation, mom, dad, kids, isn't their typical buyer profile that they find within the townhomes. Is that fair to say?
That's fine. Can we jump to the dwelling orientation exhibit? I think it's Exhibit C, also called the concept plan.
Page 19.
Okay. I have a question about your, first of all, SFA requires 360-degree architecture.
Ordinance.
Yep. It is, no. It says Exhibit C and it's page 17. There we go, thanks.
I'm looking at the red line, sorry.
The SFA ordinance, which is in the UDO, which is what you're using as your underlying ordinance, talks about 360-degree architecture. And you are real close to that, but not quite. And let me go through some of that. I got way too much stuff here. On page 4, front building facade, you require, there's a lot of good stuff in here. And you require a masonry wainscot, a minimum height of 36 inches above grade or the bottom of the first floor windows of each dwelling. And that's great. Then you go to the side facade building requirements. At a minimum, the side elevation of each end unit on a townhome building shall use, and it gives here, side facade facing a public space, common rights-of-way, alley, will provide a wainscot, and I assume you mean a masonry wainscot? It doesn't say? Okay.
Yes.
A minimum height, the same thing as the first one. So here we get to the side, and what I wanted to pull this up for was, is there any side there that doesn't face a right-of-way, a common area, or an alley? Because I didn't see very many, so why don't we just make that match the sign?
I think what we can do is we can take this exhibit that we have in the ordinance and identify which those elevations are that are represented by that comment.
Okay. Because it looks to me like almost every side facade there faces one of those elements. In which case, maybe it's just easier to say, we'll put a wainscot on all the side facades.
I think those that may not qualify based on that, the way it's written today, would only be these
But that's a path.
interior to the site. So if the desire is to see all the dwellings have that same side elevation treatment, that's a comment that we'll take into consideration and see if we can address that.
And I only say that, John, because it appears that when you get down to it, you're going to have maybe you're going to have very few that will not require that. So,
And in all likelihood, that may be a conclusion we would have reached after zoning approval and made it that way anyway. So
Okay.
we'll
yeah, I'm
circle
just
back on that comment.
trying to make it simple. On your rear facade, again, there's no masonry requirement. Tell me, and I'm a little confused with front load and rear load. On the ones along Union Street, they're all rear load. So they will require masonry or something on the front that faces Union, but the back will not?
Correct. The rear elevation would, not that it's defined in our ordinance, but it's the elevation that doesn't include the front
Right.
entry to the home.
And then when I get to, for example, the one at the very top that says front load. So the front of the elevation will be masonry, the back will be
Right here.
nothing. Or, it won't have anything. And then when I get to the one farther down, it's a rear load,
And
so the back will not have masonry there.
So the masonry
Faces-
would, this is a rear load home. The masonry would be on the side that's visible as you turn into the site.
Okay, all right, thank you, because I was a little confused on rear load, front load, and which gets the masonry. I have a big concern about the tree preservation. You know, we spent a lot of time in our UDO putting forth a tree preservation ordinance. And I think it's fairly reasonable. It doesn't mean you have to go in and do an inventory of every tree in those woodlands. It just means you have to do an inventory of the significant ones that you want to keep. And without that, we have no control. Staff has no ability to administer tree preservation, so I don't like throwing that whole thing out. I would like you to put in our tree preservation. It's not saying you have to preserve all of them. There may be a lot in there that you want to remove and make it a much more savanna-type area, maybe more attractive.
We discussed that pretty recently. I did with our client. There may be some items within the ordinance that they're not clear on, that we're going to sit down with staff and make sure that they clearly understand some of those provisions in the UDO. And
Okay.
it's likely that we won't have a wholesale adjustment. There may just be a modest adjustment to that in the event that there are items that are too challenging to overcome. So stay tuned. I
Okay,
think we're going to come back with some adjustments to that section based on a conversation we need to have with staff.
because we used to have, like, Brookside did a tree inventory and preserved a lot of trees, and we had a lot of them doing that. And now people are saying, I'm just going to say that's a preserved woodlands. And staff really has no way to determine what that is or what's in it, that if you cut down a bush, is that bad? I mean,
Yeah, and I think in some cases there was more of a, and this is my editorial, not, there may have been a situation where the petitioners were looking for credit for those trees that were
Right.
in the preservation area as meeting standards. And in this case, we're identifying those spaces. We're not asking for credit for those meeting buffer requirements, because in those spaces that are for tree preservation, there is no required buffer. So we're saying, rather than the ordinance, which says we don't need to have a buffer, so why therefore the need to count trees and do a full-blown inventory, we're just identifying that space where tree preservation takes place geographically, because we don't need to go do counts and calipers and all this, because we're not trying to report to staff for staff to check the box that say you have the required number of plantings.
right.
Again, it's something we need to take more time with staff to understand fully, and then come back to you at your next meeting and
Right.
explain what solution we figure out.
And I understand the initial tree preservation was to preserve trees in order to get credits. This is a little bit different, but again, staff needs some way to administer this, and if there are trees there that you're going to preserve, count some big ones in there and let us know. You know, it doesn't have to be everything. There's got to be some kind of a middle ground here.
And definitely, there's going to be an inventory and analysis done on the site, because they'll go in and identify those areas for tree preservation, and then they'll go have an arborist, go in and evaluate everything, and they're going to need to remove those trees, based
Right.
on this past weekend's events.
Yep.
Those that are dead or dying, and they want to go and selectively clear those out
Right.
so that there's not issues.
So I guess my point is, if you're going to have an arborist there doing exactly what we're talking about,
Yep.
put it down in writing and, you know. There was one section when you talked about you'll preserve the trees unless you have to clear some for grading. And that bothered me, because we had an incident just last week where there was supposed to be a tree preservation along a property line, and the bulldozers went in and bulldozed everything down. Wasn't you, wasn't Pulte, but it's unfortunate. And so I don't like the word for grading, because I know what those guys on bulldozers do. They've worked at my house, and my builder said, you stand out there and watch them every minute. They're on a big machine, and they're not likely to stop. So,
We'll take a look at it and see how we can become more definitive geographically on a plan, on a map, to show you where the potential exists for any of that. to take place. I know there's going to be grading on the far south east corner of the site, right outside of where the improvements are, rather either a building or a driveway, because of the change in the topography right along this edge.
And I understand that. I just want to make sure that we're careful and we preserve those trees and don't just unnecessarily clear some because it's just easier. And that might mean putting a barrier up there. I mean, that's
Oh,
what we
absolutely.
talked about, you know,
Yep.
to identify that. How wide do you think that tree preservation area is on the southern portion?
A minimum of 25 feet.
Okay, so you think that's only 25 feet on there?
The minimum distance between that drive and the south property line is 25 feet.
Okay. Because they look bigger on the picture, and then I read the ordinance, and I thought, is that the same? So, okay. I trust you. There's a whole lot of stuff in the end of this PUD about improvement standards and passing blisters shall not apply, and decel tapers shall be based on, and then maintenance standards. I don't know that any of those should be in the PUD, and that's a staff question. That seems like it's a public works issue. I don't think we have the ability to say we won't apply a passing blister. This is on page 9. Or we'll modify.
Yeah, those are standards that are in the UDO that the Plan Commission and Council have the ability to address.
Okay.
Sometimes they're addressed at the development plan stage through the form of a waiver that you would see at the DP stage. Pulte's got enough experience where they want to identify, wanted to be transparent, wanted to say, I know I'm going to have this, this, and this to deal with. I don't want to wait. And that's not that I don't want to wait.
No, I
I'd
understand.
prefer to be transparent and show everybody and tell everybody what we're dealing with. We went to TAC. We didn't get, I don't think, pushback from Public Works on these standards, but we'll double check that.
Okay.
Before we return back to you, I'll make sure that we have sign off from Public Works on if they see anything here that gives them any heartburn.
Okay, because normally we get one of them at a time, and we usually ask Public Works, and there's a comment. This is a whole bullet, this is a whole list, and I have no idea if these are appropriate or not.
And so let me give you an example. Waivers are discretionary, as the Plan Commission knows,
Right.
and Pulte has obligations with regard to closing. And let's say that they have an obligation to close before they would be through detailed development plan stage, and they need to know today that fundamentally they can produce the plans that they've shown you,
Right.
rather than waiting and determining if that's the case at development plan stage. So they would like, they're asking for that because they need some additional assurances before they can close with the property owner,
Right.
knowing that these are acceptable things from Public Works. It could be 6 months from now before we're back in front of you. That's an example. It could be 3 months. But it could be some time after they were to close that they would be back in front of you, and they didn't want to have to ask for discretion on those items if Public Works was comfortable supporting them.
And I appreciate that concern, and I want to work with it, but I want Public Works to tell me.
Yep, absolutely. We'll circle back with them as well, and to the extent they're okay with these, we'll make sure we get that in writing. And if anything needs to be modified or removed, obviously it won't be on the next draft, and could potentially be dealt with on a case by case through a waiver situation. All of these things look like they are items that
Okay,
would be
and I
eligible for a
understand
waiver.
Pulte needing to know, to have it fit their design. I just need to know from Public Works that all those things fit, and
And-
I'm not creating some kind of a disaster
And
that they're going to be mad at me for.
tentatively, I can tell you yes, because it's been a while since I looked at the comments from Public Works, but I don't recall that there was a suggestion to remove those from the ordinance, but let me go back and double check.
Okay, yeah, and we don't get those, so I wouldn't know.
And Public Works does review PUD ordinances as they're submitted, especially the infrastructure-related items. That's regular.
Lots of little things, but if you're going to be doing brick wainscot on 3 sides, which it looks like you're going to be doing, could you just do it on the 4 side? It's mostly garage doors anyway, and make it 360-degree architecture.
Well, comment
Like we
noted.
were getting a nod back there.
It's not that much.
I comment noted by me.
I know.
I look like my client's already given you the
Yeah.
indication that yes, that can be done.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the new design and the product. And some of these little things, I think we get into, we're gonna just do that and just do that, but when you look at this, there's very few, so let's just, I probably have more things, but I'll let somebody else talk.
Anybody to my left want to chime in here with anything that hasn't already been covered or reinforcing something that has been covered?
I've got just, I guess, one quick question here. First of all, again, thank you for reducing the number of units down to 73, going with the 2 stories and making the various changes that you have. I appreciate you changing the southern buffer from 20 feet to 25 feet. But I'd like maybe a clear explanation of what that buffer is going to look like, the delineation between the subdivision and the cemetery. And I know we had talked before about maybe trying to make it a similar buffer to the buffer that's on the south side of
Yeah.
the cemetery.
And the south perimeter buffer along the shared property line would include preservation of existing trees and then supplementing those as shown here. In addition to that, generally along the property line, there would be a metal fence, not chain link, but a metal fence. And including that is based on an agreement that Pulte has with the seller. The seller said, as part of the transaction, we want you to do X. And Pulte said, I shall agree to doing X, which would be a metal fence, preservation of the existing trees, and then along that edge, because they wanted to have, I recall that perhaps along the south edge there was removal of trees, including a mound, but they wanted to have a fence along that perimeter, one that, you know, somebody's dogs, if they got loose, couldn't just meander or wander over into that space. There's not going to be situations where people have like hidden fence or that, I mean, in the townhome. So we're providing along that edge what the seller had requested that Pulte provide.
Okay, thank you, John. Appreciate that. Thank you.
One other quick question, John. I know the lot coverage is like 100%. The people own the building, they don't own the land that it's on, correct?
That's correct. It may extend 5 feet or so beyond the
Okay.
edge of the dwelling.
So going back to everything has to be a brick wainscot that's common area. All this is common area.
That's in terms of the side elevations where we're talking about the rear elevation.
Okay.
So side elevation had that.
Yeah, side elevation or whatever.
Yeah, so we, I think based upon Rex's communication just from a moment ago, all sides of all dwellings would include a masonry wainscot. Yeah, so all sides, all dwellings would have masonry wainscot.
Okay. It's going to look nice.
It will.
All right, I'll shut up.
Other comments? Dave, Cindy?
Hi, John. Thank you for making these 2-story. That was something I was concerned about, and I thought it was important. I think it's going to overall look lovely there, especially given what's on the other side of the cemetery, too. Ginny covered so many of my concerns that I had, and most of my problems that I have are with certain parts of the language. Because, again, going back to things like the buffer yard, for instance, it's 25 feet, and you said you're going to want to preserve these existing trees, but then there's all these reasons that you cannot preserve them, if you will, and then there's no provision to have to replant anything either. And so, you know, circumstances, things happen, and with the way this is worded, you wouldn't have to go back and put anything there either. And so that kind of thing is concerning to me. And
We'll eliminate that in the text.
Okay, and especially when we start hearing, you know, well, it's needed for drainage, it's needed for this, and then next thing you know, there's nothing left, there's nothing there. And so for those to be considered, you know, a needed buffer yard, at least in our mind, when we're talking about the cemetery and things and wanting to see something protected there, I get nervous.
Yeah. And the contemplation there was, regarding drainage, was more so if there's a drainage pipe that becomes regulated that we have to accommodate, we have to clear a 10 or 15 foot wide path for that pipe to be installed. And if in the event that the pipe has to go in that place because that's where it has to be, there would have to be a provision in the ordinance to allow for us to clear that narrow band for the pipe to be installed, but we'll break it down a little better than it is and in an attempt to eliminate your concern.
Okay, there's a few other things. The townhomes on corner lots shall have a minimum of one shade tree required between the dwelling and the street. Normally, we have the in addition, where you'd have one in the front yard and one on the side. And this makes it seem as if you only have to do one and not the additional. So if you could clarify that. And then the foundation plantings, again, you say that the lots each have to have 4 shrubs and 1 shade tree. And if the shade tree doesn't fit in the front, then there's just no tree and, 4 shrubs. And so there's no foundation plantings actually required. In your language, you exempt yourself from that requirement. So,
We'll clean it up.
okay.
There's definitely going to be the foundation plantings adjacent to the dwelling in terms of shrubs along the perimeter. And we need to go back to that language and specify about the tree planting.
Okay. One thing I know I didn't request of you, and I don't see it represented here, was perhaps on the, at least on the ones facing Union, was something with corner offsets or projections on the side elevations, just so we didn't have those walls again between the buildings, just flat. It's not as crucial when it's 2-story instead of 3-story, but still I think it just would, we looked at those examples, if you recall, and it does help so tremendously, and I don't know if you could possibly accommodate anything like that in there, but it'd be nice if you could, at least on a few.
Let's see what we'll take a look at it. I think also we want to provide, if we can, generally what a site elevation looks like, because there's a lot of variation in that site architectural plane. I think we had an example of it in that cross-section, what we think it's going to, sorry, I'm going to find it here. Oh, that's the ordinance, sorry. Is it that one? That's the ordinance, master plan. Yep, there we go. So that's the side elevation of what that may be, that 2-story. Whether it's gable-in treatment or the offset for the garage, it'll provide some, I think what you're asking for is that can there be some offset or bump out on the side elevation? And let's see if we can take a look at that and maybe just add where there's a larger open space area or on the far south end. Just throwing out ideas like box window, something to give it some offset or some additional relief.
That'd be great. Jenny covered most
I have
everything.
another
Okay, very good.
Um,
Matt, anything?
I-
You're good? Jenny again, I guess then?
On page 4, under building materials, a composite veneer panel. I don't know what that is. Is it a trim piece
It's in
or?
the eaves, the composite
Oh,
veneers
okay.
is in the
Thank you.
eaves.
Thanks.
Dave, did you have anything?
No, not really. I think the petitioner's gotten plenty of excellent guidance from other commissioners as far as refinements to make going forward, and do really appreciate the changes you've made since the last presentation. This is, it's a tricky site, obviously, relatively small site, and it was hard to, I'm sure, to just avoid the grid layout that you had before, and I do like this and the changes you made throughout, so thank you.
Thank you.
Anything further from Andre, Victor?
So the Boulevard entrance, I don't think was mentioned much other than you said it during your presentation. I just wanted to point it out because I think it's not a minor change to me. That's a big difference to give that break between buildings. I think that's a huge improvement right there. So I like it.
Thank you.
Victor's good? I think we've exhausted our comments. I have nothing further that I'm needing to add, so appreciate your time and effort and look forward to seeing you back with something that incorporates all this and see what happens.
Sounds great. Thank you.
So, all right, thank you.
I can't say anything over this mask.
We have a second discussion item in our miscellaneous items of business tonight, 2205-PUD-09, I-Beach 31 at Grand Park, PUD. Move on to that and start with the staff report.
Good evening, APC members. Again, for the record, Ryan Collingwood with the Community Development Department. The item presented before you tonight is the I-Beach 31 at Grand Park PUD. This proposal is a change in zoning request for about 3 acres, which is located north of 181st Street and east of the future Grand Park Boulevard extension. The proposed use of the property is a beach sport facility as well as other ancillary uses. Since the May 4th public hearing, the petitioner has provided exhibits highlighting exterior elevations, numerous exhibits relating to building materials, and a fleshed-out landscape and concept plan, in addition to some other additional items. This item is before you this evening for a discussion meeting. It was introduced at the April 11th City Council meeting, and as I mentioned, received its public hearing at the May 4th APC meeting. The petition has received no public comments to date. Representing the petitioners that are here tonight are Eric Douthit of Church, Hiddle, and Antrim, Katie Connor, owner of iBeach, and Rennie Turner is available remotely if needed. The petitioners intend to present updated details of the project tonight. They are available to answer any questions, as am I, should you have any for staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Start out it. Thank you. Proceed.
Eric Douthit with Church, Hiddle, and Antrim, 116th North Union here in Westfield. I have my tie on. John didn't tell me what the building, what the dress code was going to be, or I would have done that.
We'll talk to him about that.
At our last meeting, there were 3 main concerns. 2 of them dealt with the nature of our exhibits, and the other dealt with the roofing materials. We do have joining us via Zoom, if necessary, our roofing material engineer for additional questions. We have provided some additional documentation, brochures, and the like with regards to that material. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about today, but we'll be available to answer questions. Mr. Turner is available as well. The second question dealt with creating a more realistic site plan as well as more realistic elevations. Those have been submitted to staff, though not in time for us to take a vote here tonight. That's why we thought it would be a good informational time to get some additional information back from you guys with regards to questions. We have every intent of being here for the August 1st meeting, if at all possible, for purposes of a vote. I believe this is the new landscaping plan, not just the site plan. The key here isn't to show exactly what we're going to have landscaping-wise as much as it is to show the layout with regards to where the parking places are going to be, where the islands would be, and the like. We would certainly submit a landscaping plan that's more detailed for purposes of admission by staff once we got to that point. We think this generally complies with the underlying ordinance, though I haven't had a specific discussion with Ryan to that effect. Something you'll note with this would be the foundation plantings that are against the building, as well as where the islands have been located. If we could turn to the elevations. The one thing I know that I don't know this, but I don't think the murals would be permitted under the ordinance as written. I didn't have a chance to get in touch with our engineer before that, so ignore all those pretty pictures because they're not going to go on the side as written. However, you can see the material itself. If you'll go to the top there for me, Ryan, the architectural wall panels are what we would intend to be using in this particular location. And I believe this is the color that we intend at this time. Is that right, Katie? So that gives you a pretty good idea of what we'd look like color-wise. There's an additional rendering. There's a question asked at the last hearing with regards to how the roof was going to be phrased with regards to the signing. With regards to signs, I think it's on the next slide, Ryan. Not that one, though that'd be an awesome building if we got that one, but that's not it. There's one more, maybe. It's the one, it shows the triangle of the white siding, then it's got the architectural wall panels underneath it. Maybe under building renderings, but if not. But to answer your question, The specific question was whether, there, you can sort of see it in that picture there. I do not have my pointer, there it is right there. That's what it's gonna look like with regards to the paneling on the side along with the architectural underneath. We don't know if we're gonna have 3 or 4 garage doors at this particular time. We don't have that particularly designed, but there would be garage doors inside to allow airflow when it's hot there during the summer, as well as other entrance points as we're going through. I think, just generally speaking, those address the big concerns that we had with regards to giving more accurate depictions of what we were looking for, as well as things that would comply, and addressing some of the roof concerns. I'm available for questions, as is Katie, as is Mr. Turner, if you have any specific questions that we can address for you here today.
Thank you. I'll look to my left here first, see if there's anybody that has comments they'd like to start the discussion with. Dave Schmitz looks like a volunteer.
Eric, while you're talking about the building design and have those screens up, what's the west side of the building looking like?
So I think it'll be for architecture with those panels all the way around. Isn't that right, Katie? Yes. So I don't know if we've got a west, but that.
There isn't a rendering for it. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, I don't have that specifically, but it would be four-sided architecture that would generally comply with the ordinance for GB.
Was there
And
any
I'll jump in maybe while we're talking elevations, because that was a concern I had, that the west and the north both were notable by their absence. And
We'll
we've
make sure-
talked about the awkward little sliver of property that is not part of this site that separates it from the future Grand Park Boulevard. So that's a pretty key elevation, and it's got to have nice materials, windows, something to really dress it up. And the north is a very visible side as well.
We absolutely agree, and I'll make sure that we have all four sides shown to you on the first, so you can get a good representation of what that looks like.
Okay. Dave?
Thank you.
That covers it. That's
Oh, okay. Anybody else to my left? Matt, Cindy, Mike?
Some of my more experienced commissioners can get into the details, but I think this is an amazing addition to the Grand Park area, and what a great move from where it's at now, and it'll just attract more and more people to the Westfield area, and the cafe and everything included. This looks pretty exciting, so thank you. Thank you.
Okay. To my right, Ginny, Victor, Andre?
I have
Oh, you
a
had
few
something.
things.
I thought you were not
So-
leaving that you there.
Yeah, some of the language in here is giving me a little bit of pause, the way it's written. The things when you say like the foundation planting requirements, I hate that I'm focusing on that today. It's not the way we typically word things, and I think that's probably the case with a whole lot of this. You also say the buffer yard requirement shall not apply, and you only have 10-foot setbacks on the side and rear. And I'm trying to understand, well, and I don't know a ton about volleyball, but I would think you could easily, like, just clock it, and it would go far more than 10 feet onto someone else's property. And maybe I'm wrong, but, I mean, when you're talking about especially the outside, and only having 10 feet on your setbacks potentially on the outside,
The last people who want to lose balls are us. There will be fencing that are around it to make sure that there aren't any balls that would be lost as we're going forward.
and so what kind of fencing are you planning to do?
What's the exact nature of the fencing around the outside, do you remember? I'll make sure we've got exact pictures of it, but that's where the foundation comes in, is because we have to have that fencing. That's why we have to have the foundation planning exception, because everything around that fence would be subject to foundation plantings. And given the internal nature of some of those fences, we don't expect to have foundation plantings on all the internal pieces. But we'll make sure we specifically outline what kind of fencing we'll be using around the outdoor volleyball courts.
You exempt yourself from a lot of things, but I don't understand why you need to do that. So, again, I'm just kind of trying to understand why it's written the way it is.
Most of it deals with the volleyball use, I think. If you have specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
yeah, and some of the things I'm just not clear with exactly. I know that you say you're going to follow the GB standards, but this doesn't seem like it's jiving with some of that. You also say that you could have a restaurant and bar, plus office, retail sales, locker rooms, and it does say that they would be ancillary to an indoor multi-sport athletic facility. And then, but may, but can include but are not limited to. And right now, and I don't know how staff interprets that, but if this closes, for instance, could they turn this whole thing into a restaurant or bar? Or offices, or, I mean, how does that work?
I don't have a great answer for you right now because I haven't spent any time thinking about that, but the way this is worded, to me, it looks like uses ancillary to an indoor multi-sport athletic facility include, and the list of those things that you just listed. So if there's not a multi-sport athletic facility as the prominent use, those things would not be permitted.
Is there potential for them to say, and again, this is nothing against you, I just have to look at ordinance language as I see it, but that they only have outdoor, the outdoor fields or whatever, and then the whole inside is turned into nothing but, say, retail sales in a restaurant? Could that be possible?
We specifically do say indoor multi-use, not multi-sport as part of the ordinance. So that would not be our intention, and we'd be happy to tighten up the language with staff in order to make sure that that was in fact the case if staff was worried about that interpretation.
It says it has to be ancillary to an indoor sport facility, so they couldn't have a bunch of outside stuff and then put stores inside.
Right.
That's our intention.
Right.
I would say, I mean, just off the cuff here, I would think at least more than 50% of the building would have to be used for indoor multi-sport athletic facility use in order to check that box.
What would the typical setbacks be in this district? I'm sorry, I don't have it pulled up.
What is it, GB?
Well, while you're looking up setbacks, I guess I have a question. First of all, I think this is a great thing, and I support it. It's just getting it right to fit that's the issue. You have a concept plan, but you say you won't necessarily follow that. It may vary. And I kind of jumped out at me because then I go to setbacks, and your front yard setback is 10 feet. And yet on the concept plan, that's quite a bit different. So those are two big disconnects. And I guess I'd kind of like to know which way you're headed, not showing us a concept plan that may be turned 360 degrees or changed completely. So
That's a good question. One of the things that was specifically asked for the last meeting was to emphasize most of our landscaping going towards the south side of the property.
Right.
And the one issue we have is we have not engineered this site to the point where we know exactly where the building can sit.
Okay.
So therein lies the concern of, on the concept plan, where exactly would the building fit? For example, in the previous concept plan, you'd seen the building was, I think, 100 by 200. It's now 85 by 250, still the same square footage, but a little bit skinnier in order to allow us to get more indoor volleyball within that. We can certainly work with our engineer to make sure that that setback specifically to the front encompasses the landscaping request that was made and is consistent with what we're intending to do on that landscaping. We don't need to vary from that, but we just haven't engineered it yet to know exactly where that building is going to sit. But with the four-sided architecture,
Yeah. 'Cause if your front yard setback, if your front setback is 10 feet, that doesn't give you much room for the landscaping that we talked about. If you can't put it elsewhere, then at least make the front look really pretty, and 10 feet's going to be pretty tight.
They had 20 feet on the front, but then 10 on the side and rear.
Okay, front yard, I see 20 feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just.
Anyway, there's just a bit of a disconnect there for me.
Yeah.
and again, with regards to setback versus landscaping and how those can be phrased a little bit differently, but we can certainly come up with language that tightens up that specific request
Okay.
so that there are no holes in
I
it,
guess
because
what I'm
that's our
most
intention.
concerned about is that the landscaping be heavily on the front, and if 20 feet, then I don't necessarily care if your building's only 20 feet or whatever, but
Understood.
I don't
yes.
want somebody to come in and do something different and make it not look as nice.
And we agree with you.
While we're kind of on the broad topic of setbacks and landscaping, something that's just occurred to me as I'm sitting here looking at it, prompted somewhat by the discussion of balls that might get clocked to the north and the east that will go off of the site, subject to whatever fencing comes along. There's 4 trees on the north and west, each on the north and west, plus some landscaping that's generally depicted here. I would think trees next to a volleyball court could get run into a lot and injure a lot of players. Are we really gonna have trees there, or?
They would be outside the fencing. So to the extent that they're planted, then I'm certain they'd be put in a place that would keep everybody safe.
So the gray depiction of sand volleyball courts is not the actual play area, but play area would be somewhat smaller than what's depicted here.
I'll modify that specifically. The intention of this was to show a potential landscaping plan, not to show what the landscaping plan is going to be. So we would comply with the number of trees, but the location of trees may be modified once we have exactly where the site is engineered. We'd make sure we had the number of trees that are required, et cetera. So no, we won't be putting any trees in the middle of volleyball, and that's probably too close to where we are on the side to make sure nobody gets hurt. But your point's well taken, and we'll certainly try to get that.
Just want to make sure there is landscaping
Yes.
there, and don't want to be shown something that we then don't get.
Yeah, and again, given the unusual nature, and you don't consider beach volleyball landscaping, I know, but it's still got that outdoor sort of nice feel to it. So we want it to look as nice as anybody else, because that's going to be our biggest advertising, is people are making their way to Grand Park, and they want to see a nice facility, and we want to present a nice facility.
I have a question. I'm trying to figure out how this is going to play out. Normally in our ordinances, we would tie it and say substantial compliance and things like that. Yours kind of does the opposite, to say, I'm showing you this as general massing and things like that, but this is not necessarily at all what we're giving you, and could change. And so especially for the architecture, and when you're talking about something that we're not really familiar with, especially with this roofing membrane, and we don't know really the building we're gonna get at this point with your language, and you don't have to give that to us with this. We kind of don't know what we're getting. It's just how I feel when I read it. So that's kind of concerning to me right now. Because this is not something we've done before, obviously. You know,
Correct.
and I don't
We know we're
what-
going to be using that building material. We know we're going to use that roofing material. But we didn't know specifically how many garage doors we were going to have, for example. We didn't want that to be an issue of substantial compliance. So those are that's one of the reasons we specifically didn't include that substantial compliance language. We didn't know exactly where the layout of the building was going to be yet because of the engineering. So that's why we didn't want to put in that substantial compliance language and set an expectation for a 100 by 200 foot building when we end up going with an 85 by 250 because that's how the site gets engineered out. So that was our concern, and that's why we didn't include that specific nature. With regard to the building materials, we're very comfortable with those building materials and we can include that in the ordinance if that's necessary. With regards to how we're going to handle the roof and the roofing materials, we can make that specific statement. So I don't know if it's gables, I always get those words confused, but to make sure it's as represented here, as well as how the roofing materials.
You mentioned several different examples and things, and there's pictures of other applications that it used in, but it doesn't say that that's what you're going to do, or which exactly it's going to play out. Is someone-
Rennie, or would you like to say something?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Hopefully you can hear me all right. Thank you for the invite. Pleasure to meet you all. I know that I was asked to comment on the membrane portion of this, but the bulk of the work that I do is in consulting and building sports facilities. So I think there's probably a half dozen times where I could jump in and offer some comments to some of the questions. So the first thing I would say that is in the overall design of the facility, the ultimate intent is to build a facility that is compliant to a national federation standard that allows for all levels of volleyball play that Katie might want to have in this facility. So to the questions on the design, on the exterior layout of the facilities, all of the runoff areas, fail-safe areas are all included in an official certified layout. So to the question about is there going to be an issue for safety with someone running into a tree or something like that, a more detailed layout of that outside bay of courts will answer all those questions for you. As to the building design, you know, and the word multi-purpose, I've been doing this for 25 years, and one of the things that I have seen is that a facility that's built with the intent of having one particular or two sports changes over time. And I've certainly done facilities that were indoor tennis facilities that 10 years later were indoor soccer facilities. So one of the things that I work with Katie on in the overall footprint of the building is to give her enough height in the building, sidewall height, account for the opportunity for her to do volleyball. But if she desires to do anything else in the future, that really brings up the multi-purpose aspect of the facility. The summary basis of design is, you know, a structural steel frame, an application that has architectural features on 1, 2, 3 sides. I think right now it's depicted as 2. And in my experience with sports, using the PVC architectural membrane on the roof, which you're starting to see now in almost all sports applications, it seemed like a step up from a simple metal cladding or some other type of product that could be put on the roof. So there is a basic basis of design. What is kind of we're just getting into now are the approved architectural features that you folks would like to see on the building. And those are open for discussion, but there is a basis design. We just don't have, at this point, the approved list of what architectural features you really want to see on this building.
But the materials would all comply with the existing underlying GB ordinance when it comes to materials, except for the roof. That's the only exception that we have in that regard.
Kind of related to what Cindy brought up, I was trying to figure out how to verbalize this, and you may have kind of helped steer me in the right direction. I'm not as much from a ordinance language perspective, but more from an experiential viewpoint coming to this proposed facility. Like you say, there's not a concept that we can say we're trying to substantially comply with. So I was struggling with where to take these comments. You've got a site that's very full the way it's shown right now, but there's no place for water unless it's underground detention, and usually that gets too expensive. So I was imagining this is going to change a lot, and that makes it difficult to review in terms of, do we like the way it's siting here and the way it fits? And another experiential thing is the courts are the action, and the building, which looks fantastic, are behind. Now, it's not as extensive as larger developments where I've used the term sea of parking, but it is back behind all the asphalt. And so there's a lot of things that I think there's some great ingredients here that have room for improvement, but as you've said yourself, it may not be this layout anyway, so I don't know where to take those comments.
And you're exactly right. And then we're trying to find, where do you put the most parking? You can't put where do you put the building, and where do you put those volleyball courts? It's going to be a challenge for the engineers to properly lay that out. I don't think there's any question. But this particular plan complies with what we've submitted with regards to the ordinance. And again, the only variance we're requesting from the ordinance itself and materials deals with the roofing material. Everything else is going to comply with the existing underlying GB zoning. I'll have to check with the engineer on the drainage, how that's exactly going to run, because I think that there might be a master drainage plan to the east that's going to allow us to go to, because there's a master drain that we're going to have to rebuild that goes up to the east. I think that can take care of our water, but I'll confirm that before our meeting on the 1st to make sure that that's in fact the case.
And it's come up enough times, I'll just knock the roof off as far as the comment from me, because it was so much, you've answered my questions in spades. My comment about the material and what it's like on the sloped roof portion was really for petitioner's benefit, and you've responded to all that anyway. My real concern was just not having it on the vertical surfaces, which you've confirmed it's not. That was just from that older concept where it was unclear whether that was the tensile fabric or not, so.
I'm really excited about this project. fellow commissioners mentioned the west and north sides. Looking at what we have in front of us right now, I would say just mimic what's on the south side, put that on the north side. I think that's comparable. And then on the west side, with that being what will be seen the most, whether it be some murals that's there on the east side on the entrance, or some art mural, whatever it is, to signify, hey, this is what this building is used for, and who knows what that little sliver of land will be used for in the future, whether, you know, you guys have the chance to expand your parking or a little pond, whatever it needs to be at the time. But I think it'll be a great kind of, not to overhype, but landmark, so to speak, of welcoming people into Grand Park. And I mean, you guys are going to be the first ones seen, so hey, welcome to Grand Park. This is a sports facility, and so
I think it'll be super cool too. I do know that, again, the murals are not permitted under the ordinance, under the sign ordinance, so those will be coming out unless we were to modify the ordinance to permit that to happen consistent with staff. And certainly if we did do murals, they would not be advertising murals or sign murals. They would be similar to the sports murals you see there or something like that if we go in that direction. So if we do murals, those would be specific murals, and it'd be this and only that if we go in that direction, not something we could vary. I know that can be a concern.
I would definitely, if we can do that, like to see it, because I think they just add character to the building. Whether I would rather have that than just a regular old warehouse and people driving by me like, what is this used for? You know, people see iBeach 31 is like, there's a logo, but let's see some more character. I think we need some more of that in our community. And then just one other exhibit that's on here, whether it's called this or whatever is in the future, and we talked about a little bit of possible restaurant usage, but that's another aspect that I'm excited about of Sandbar Cafe, because I don't play volleyball, but you know, I'd love to go and have that kind of beach experience. So I think this kind of expands broader than just a sports use, but really those that are just interested in general in sports and the beach and et cetera, with here being in the Midwest, it'd be a nice little location for us to go for. So overall, I know there'll be some changes in the future, but I really dig this project, so thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple comments. I guess the first one is, it's funny in the United States that there are hotbeds of beach volleyball. And I live at the beach, and it's very big in Virginia Beach. And we don't have an indoor facility. We have a lot of beach volleyball. There's at least probably beyond 10 other areas I know where it's very big. There's a lot of it going on. And it's a niche sport that attracts a lot of people from outside the area, especially if you have a nice facility. So, you know, I'm excited to be part of this, and I've been assisting Katie for a little while on this. I think that we have a long way to go from what I'm hearing, and I agree. But the one thing that I've been dealing with now for at least a few months is the idea of the roof membrane, this PVC, architectural PVC, being an acceptable product. And I think could I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but can I walk away from this meeting thinking, yes, I think that this membrane is going to be an acceptable product for the sports facility?
From my perspective, I'd say yes. I think it's a nice added feature. I'll let Andre comment more on that. But before I forget again, you mentioned niche. So this commercial full-line catalog here, looking at this, just in a broad stroke, for any potential petitioners listening, I would love to see more of this architecture in Westfield. Again, I think this adds character that we are in desperate need of. So thank you for adding something unique.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll answer directly to that question. To be very, very clear, I thought I was saying before, I don't have an issue with the tinsel roof on the roof, as long as it's not on the vertical surfaces. I'll be interested as it gets developed more into a concept plan that you can commit to, because like right now it shows overhangs. That maybe that works, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I'm not an architect that details all that stuff out, but I don't have any issue with it on the roof.
Kind of on the same lines as talking about the murals that apparently are going away. There were also 3 features identified as prefab sunset palm trees. Prefabbed out of what, and are those still intended to be a part of this? How, I mean, obviously we don't have native palm trees in Indiana. So what we do grow here doesn't really go along with beach volleyball and what the movies would show you. How are you gonna do these? Or what would be the plan on how these things are gonna be created?
They're going to be art pieces as much as anything else is the best way to think of it. It's just going to be a,
Likely to be metal?
I don't know, are they made of metal or do you know? Yeah, we'll find out the answer to that question. Maybe bring a picture of what they've looked like in other locations. Since
Okay.
we can't grow our own palm trees here, right?
Yeah,
So-
not easily. Certainly, I appreciate, like Victor was saying, the upgrade to the exterior finishes. A lot of users depicted in the manufacturer's information certainly are quality users. So that's comforting, be helpful if staff and everybody is not familiar with it, to have samples. I'm not going to make a comment regarding roof material myself just yet, but maybe it's trending a good direction.
Thank you.
Well, from a perspective of all the new sports facilities being built, all of them are now using a portion of the overall project with architectural membrane. All the new football designs all have it, quite a bit of it, in fact. So, yeah, it's trending in a great direction. It adds that flavor to it. It makes it unique, as you mentioned earlier. I would also say that on one of the slides here, you showed some images of an indoor aquatic facility. The other thing specific to this particular type of building product is a interior liner, which is bright and white and looks great, as opposed to structural steel members being exposed. And I guess I've done about 15 casinos. They all like the liner system. The entertainment facilities like the liner system. And in this particular building, I think you're going to see, no, I think it was on the other slide there. You had maybe the elevation drawing. You showed an aquatic facility. But one of the upgrades that clients like a lot is the interior look of the building. It really looks like a sports facility on the inside.
Any further comments from the dais here?
Thank
There's
you.
still a ways to go, but you made some great progress. We're pleased to have had you here and look forward to your next return with some updated materials.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, I tell you what, if you go forward with the project, I'll bring you a palm tree from where I am.
Just build a big building around it. All right, all other agenda items are continued to future meetings. So we skip down to reports and comments. Reports from plan commissioners in general. Anybody have anything to comment on this evening? Does not look that way. Kristen Berkman is not present tonight. We were on the downtown project. Each of us that were serving in that capacity have been working on evaluations of the two consultants so we can kind of come to a decision point hopefully soon. We were hoping to have had those things in. Kristen was last week. The response was a little short of full, so since she's out this week, they're not going to be evaluated till sometime after the 25th. Other than that, I'm not sure there's anything else to report on the downtown update. Kevin, are you aware of anything? No. Okay, City Council liaison.
Council met July 11th. Bob Beaudry and Linda Nass gave council their RDC quarterly update. Very comprehensive. If anyone's looking for more information, please watch that YouTube. The ordinance creating a local historic preservation commission passed. And this is probably important to this plan commission to know and understand that. So this would establish this historic preservation commission, and they will have a process that they will need to go through. It's an appointed group that will be doing this. I don't think anything is set up yet. Kevin, you could probably tell me more, maybe not. So obviously in its infancy, but it was created. And so that will be moving forward. The Andover PUD Amendment 1, we recommended approval, and it passed. The ARPA Committee's recommendation on funding for the nonprofits was approved. So that was $500,000 that went to 7 different nonprofits. or will be going to, I should say. We don't have the agreement yet. An ordinance amending the UDO was introduced, primarily addressing performance bonds for landscaping, and that will be here August 1st. The Westfield Yard PUD was introduced, and that will also be here August 1st. And the Star Steak Company food truck request was actually denied for a number of reasons. That's it.
Okay, thank you. There was a BZA meeting in between our last meeting and tonight, so Dave, do you have a report on that?
There was a meeting which Victor ran very well. It was virtual, and we had 4 items that we considered. The first was a garage to permit an accessory building closer than 10 feet to the front yard of a property at 161st and Oak Road, northwest corner. They just, the home doesn't have a garage. They wanted to build a 3-car detached garage, and that was approved. Gonzalez Construction, which is located on 161st Street, just south of, kind of close to Kroger there. He's operated his business out of there. Mauricio Gonzalez has for years out of his home. And he sought a variance to permit a construction trade-off. It's basically his operation on a odd-shaped little parcel on Westfield Park Road, right where the Monon crosses it. That was granted. And let's see. Then there was a petition for a woman who uses, it's almost, well, this property is located on the south side of 32, just east of Joliet Road. And this woman bought this property and didn't have an understanding of the use of the property and what was permitted. And essentially, it's like a mini barn building, essentially. And she uses it just for private purposes, for like craft activities with her kids. She wanted to do some other things, which are problematic. The gist of it was she got a temporary variance to at least allow her to continue doing what she's doing, which is actually a fairly attractive building and not objectionable what she does. She's going to be very limited in what she's going to be able to do with this site, but she did get a temporary variance to at least get the enforcement action stopped so she can continue what she's doing, and she's litigating against the person she bought from, so that's really her end game. West Fork Whiskey was the final matter. They got a temporary, they got variances to permit temporary gravel parking lots on the north and east side of their building. Obviously, their site's going to change, orientation's going to change when the road changes through there, and they felt like they needed a little bit more parking, but they didn't want to put something in that they would later take out. So relatively modest change to parking with some temporary gravel lots. I think those are like a 3-year time frame. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Staff?
Yeah, we had a new planner start with us today. Her name is Lauren Gillingham. She will be joining us at your next meeting. She wasn't able to make it this evening, but she, filling a vacant position here, so we're back to full speed, I think.
Excellent. Experienced?
Yes. Yeah, she has quite a number of years of experience. She comes with us most recently from Brownsburg. So,
okay.
An Indy area native. So it's good, and we're excited to have her.
All right, thank you. That completes all of our agenda, unless there's some other random thought that's just come up. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
From Victor McCarty. Do we have a second? Second from Dave Schmitz. Can staff please call the roll?
Robert Horke,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Jenny Keller,
Yes.
Andre Maui, Victor McCarty,
Yes.
Dave Schmitz, Cindy Spoljarek,
Yes.
and Matthew Deck.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Adjourned at 8:34 p.m.